The chili had been on since noon, low and steady, the way my dad taught me to respect a simmer. You hand a party to the smell first, then to the TV. In our Phoenix suburbs, Super Bowl Sunday might as well be a municipal holiday. Our cul-de-sac looked like a parking lot for optimism. Folding tables, coolers like small coffins filled with ice, flags of teams no one in Arizona had a reason to care about besides fantasy points. Rachel had her hands in everything. Guac, 7-layer dip, trays in and out, her hair in that loose party knot that made me forget we had taxes due next month. Tyler showed up at 2:30 with a case of good beer and that crooked grin he'd been weaponizing since we were 19. He had been my best man once, the guy who held the ring and told me I was marrying out of my league. He still had the charm to make a room lean. The hook didn't wait for kickoff. It came between commercials, during a joke about a talking dog driving a truck. Our daughter's friend, a 5-year-old with a voice like a bell, wandered into the kitchen, sniffed the chili, and said, very loud, the kind of loud that lowers crowds faster than the anthem, "Mommy slept on Tyler's couch." She said it to Rachel. Mid-sentence, mid-ladle, mid-pretend, normal. The room rebalanced like a tray that almost tips. Heads turned in a small wave. The hanging clock ticked like a judge. Rachel froze a heartbeat, then smiled too bright and said, "That was when we were all too tired after building the school float, remember, sweetie?" The kid shrugged, the way kids do when their truth has done its work. You can feel a silence in your bones even when the TV fills the air. I laughed too loud, the way a man laughs when he smells smoke and wants the backyard to stay a backyard. I turned back to the living room and found my mother's eyes. She was stirring queso for something to do. She shook her head once, the kind of small hurricane that only sons can see. Later, I'd tell myself that was when the game I was watching ended and another one kicked off. I'm a plant engineer. That means I care about flow and heat and pressure and the way small inefficiencies whisper before they scream. What I'm not is a detective. I used to think that only happens in movies. Then you live long enough next to a best man and you start to notice. The first clue had come a month back, after a Saturday where everyone used the phrase, "We'll just swing by." Tyler hosted a barbecue to watch college ball, and I crashed on his couch at the end of the night because I'd had 2 more beers than I should have, and I pay attention when life tries to keep me from a median. The next morning, in his bathroom, there were 2 toothbrushes lined up in the cup. One was his, blue handle, chewed end, the kind of attention he gives anything domestic. The other was slim, white, new. I wasn't a monster, so I didn't measure or sniff. I just registered the fact in the file folder I didn't know I was opening. A week later, when Rachel's coat brushed my arm as she handed me a dish on our way out the door, Tyler's cologne rose up like a handshake. He doesn't wear much, and when he does, it's the same citrus thing he wore at the wedding. On my wife's coat, it felt like an echo. I mention nothing because nothing is what a marriage uses when it wants to hold what it has. Then there was a delivery. The Monday night before the party, my phone pinged with one of those "your order has arrived" emails. It surprised me because it wasn't my food and the email wasn't mine. It was a shared family email we use for school blasts and Costco deals, and the order said, "Late night wings, 2 dozen, extra hot billed to Tyler's name but delivered to our address at 11:522 p.m. The details were too clean to argue with. Our house, his card, the kind of time he texts me memes about insomnia. Those were the small puzzles I stacked in my head on a shelf labeled, "Not Now." Super Bowl Sunday kicked them off the shelf, and we watched them fall in public. In the second quarter, my mom leaned over my shoulder and said softly, "After the halftime show, I'm taking the kids to my place." She didn't smile when she said it. My mother has been a nurse for 30 years. She understands when you remove people from a room before you cut it open. I nodded and took a long pull of beer that tasted like denial. At halftime, Rachel and Tyler posed for a photo in front of the TV. It was one of those over-the-shoulder shots that always ends up on Instagram. Someone's face, the blur of a star mid-song, my living room in mid-party. When our neighbor posted it to the neighborhood group chat, their bodies were angled toward each other in a way that only couples think is friendship. His hand was on the small of her back. Her chin tipped his way like a thing learning where to point. People said cute hosts. I saw geometry. I never planned to be the guy who stares at a 4K photo and zooms, but I did. In the background print, you could read a sliver of text at the bottom of the screen. It was my own reflection in the glass, turned half away. It looked like a man whose mind was already down the hall. After halftime, the kid cheerfully outed bedtime limitations. The room absorbed it. The game continued. I stood by the kitchen island with a ladle in my hand and felt like I had a wrench. Fourth quarter. A commercial about trust played over a soft piano, and I couldn't stop my mouth. I turned to Rachel and said quietly, "So only the stove could hear? Did you sleep on Tyler's couch?" She didn't answer my question. She took a breath and said later. The way she said later felt like fewer letters than usual. The last drive ended. Somewhere, someone won. I don't remember. At our place, plates stacked like shields in a pile. Friends hugged, thanked, promised we'd do a spring cookout. My mother shepherded the kids out as if it were part of the schedule, which it now was. Tyler took the trash out and stood a second too long in the cold, like a man making a wish. When the door closed behind the last guest, Rachel and I stood in the kitchen with the drone of post-party. I said the couch. She pushed hair behind her ear, a move that has gotten us through a lot of fights because it makes me want to pick her side. She said I messed up. Her voice was barely there. I messed up. There are 1,000 verbs for what we do to each other when we're lonely next to a person. She used the softest one available. I asked her with Tyler. She nodded once. I asked how many times. She said more than once. The kitchen clock clicked very politely into the next minute. I asked why. She pushed air through her teeth and said because I felt like a ghost in my own house and he made me feel solid. It was not a good reason. It was a real one. Real reasons don't help. I slept on the couch that night, which is what men do when tradition fails them and beds become statements. In the morning, my mother texted me that she had seen Tyler's truck in our driveway at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday 2 weeks prior, and she didn't say anything at the time because she didn't want to say something I already knew. It was the confirmation from the family elder I didn't ask for. I wrote back a heart, then erased it, then wrote back, "Thank you." She sent back a heart anyway. I showered until the water ran cold. Work still expected me because the plant doesn't care if your marriage has an open circuit. I stared at dashboards and saw nothing but numbers that didn't cheat. Around lunch, I opened my messages. There was a late-night text on Rachel's phone to Tyler. Last night was amazing. It stared back at me like a printed receipt. I took a screenshot, then hated myself for taking it, then hated the situation for making screenshots into proof. Evidence is what you gather when you don't know how to keep love. By the end of the week, I had done enough quiet to get loud. I drove to Tyler's place without telling Rachel because sometimes the conversation you need can't be scheduled. His garage door was open, music too loud for a weekday. He was at the workbench pretending to find a tool. He always did that when he didn't want to choose a face. He looked up and measured my posture in a quick flick. I said, "We're not doing a seam." He said, "Good." I said, "You slept with my wife." He shrugged with that full-body shrug he uses when the barbell arrives. He said, "We messed up. It was stupid." He said it like he was on my side, like he was coaching me through my own rage. He had a smirk, the one that used to be charming on game nights. On him now, it was a crack in a dam. I stepped in until there was no space left for euphemisms. I told him he had two choices, call his lawyer and mine, and write a statement that this was on him and Rachel and not on my house or my fitness as a dad, or run. He said he wouldn't sign anything because he's not dragging this into court for the kids' sake. He smiled at the word kids. That smile twisted me more than the act. It said he knew the currency and was holding it. I left before I learned the kind of man I am with my hands. Rachel cried that night in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not the single brave tear, the flood she does when her body tells her the truth. She won't put into a sentence. She asked me to keep this private for the kids. I told her, privacy is a word people use when they want to avoid consequences. She said, "Please." I said, "I won't humiliate you in public." I did not say that humiliations have a way of finding their own microphones. The next week, I visited a lawyer whose office smelled like paper and carpet cleaner and a kind of careful that sets teeth. He listened, typed, nodded in places where I thought he'd shake his head. He said we can do this quietly if all parties cooperate. He said a statement would help keep custody where it belongs, with the person who didn't invite a friend to the couch. He drafted something plain and powerful, a page where Tyler's name sat next to verbs he couldn't soften. We sent it over. He refused to sign. He said everything he had to say was between friends. My lawyer breathed out through his nose, a way that meant this would cost me weekends or money, probably both. This is where the twist rolls in even if you don't invite it. The bank called about strange activity from our joint. A wire had gone out to cover a credit card that didn't have my name on it. Rachel swore she'd told me about her old debts before we got married. Maybe she had. What she hadn't told me was that Tyler had been helping her catch up. He'd been paying off chunks with the kind of generosity that buys more than freedom. The last payment had come from our joint because when she set up the transfer on her phone, the default account said household. There is nothing like seeing household next to a number that will now not buy your kid new cleats. I dug. I pulled the bank's audit log. The payroll hit I expected, the Venmo peanut butter of normal life, the auto pays I could recite like chores. Then the wire. Then, the charge reversed because the card had not belonged to Rachel at all. It was a secondary card in Tyler's name on an account opened last summer. The kind of thing best friends share if they're running a project. The project had been my wife. The bank's memo line for the wire was a comedy with teeth, assistance. I laughed in the car. I don't know how else to say I laughed hard enough to scare myself. Social, financial, legal. The 3 points of the triangle you hope you never stand in the center of. Friends began to choose angles. A couple we'd known since the wedding texted me. They loved us both but had to step back until things settled. That means they chose the charming one. A few guys from the plant took me for beers and sat like bodyguards. One asked if I wanted him to talk to Tyler. I said no, because the last thing my daughter needs is a story about men in a driveway. My mother cooked casseroles until our fridge looked like the Midwest. She quietly put a clean set of sheets in the guest room and never said why. The party photo kept floating. The kid anecdote grew legs. That's how neighborhoods work. It doesn't even take malice. It takes a group chat and boredom and the belief that your take helps. One woman posted a memory to Facebook of the party, a collage that included the kitchen, the living room, and one candid of Rachel and Tyler talking too close, the kind of shot people caption with "these two." I saved it to the same folder where I had stored the text screenshot. It felt pathetic and necessary at once. In the middle of this, we still had a daughter to raise and a mortgage to pay and lunches to pack. The house didn't know it was a stage. It acted like a house, faithful and dumb. That made me love it more and want to leave it in the same minute. I scheduled a meeting with a mediator because the lawyer said, "Judges love paperwork that smells like grown-ups." Rachel agreed because she is not a monster either, just a person who took comfort from the wrong place. In the mediator's office, we talked parenting arrangements like we were dividing a shift schedule. It was clinical, and I thought I'd hate that, but it felt like a cold hand on a fever. In the hallway after, I asked her to tell Tyler to cooperate or the story would find light on its own. She said he won't, he's afraid. I said he should be. We almost made it through spring with our dignity. We almost staged the split as something only the adults should have to hold. Then June hit with a triple digit that made tempers sweat. Our friends decided to throw a backyard 4th of July rehearsal on a Saturday in late June because no one wants to share their actual holiday. Same people, same coolers, different gossip. I brought the chili because traditions are what you hold even when they burn. Rachel came because our daughter begged. Tyler came because our daughter begged. Tyler came because some men don't know how to stay away. It all held until it didn't. You can feel the moment approaching like monsoon air. In the golden hour, after the kids ran through sprinklers, after the second wave of tacos, after the third beer that moved someone into truth, one of our friends made a joke about couch surfing and the group laughed an ugly little laugh that meant they had chosen sides. Rachel's eyes went glassy. She put her cup down and called for the kids in the voice she uses when she's done pretending it's fine. They came over with wet hair and soft cheeks. She knelt on the pavers and told them plainly that Mommy had made a mistake with Uncle Tyler, that it had hurt Daddy, that we were going to live in 2 houses for a while, and that none of this was their fault. Our daughter asked if we still had the chili. Our son asked if the houses would be close so he could ride his bike. The backyard went very quiet. Friends stared at the sky like clouds had the decency to cover us up. Someone muttered that this is a party, Rach. Rachel flinched like she had been struck with a soft thing. She stood, thanked the hosts, and left. Tyler started to move like he might follow. I put a hand up with my palm out. He stopped. That was the closest I came to hitting him. My hand shook from the need to do something that would make the math feel fair. But I have a daughter. I put my hand down. After that, lines were drawn in chalk and then in permanent marker. The group chat split into 2, then 4, then a private group. I was added to that was basically a sympathy casserole with a side of gossip. The social circle atrophied around me until what remained were the friends who are boring in the best way, the ones who show up on moving day and don't post about it. The legal part settled in ways that were humane on paper and wrenching in practice. The parenting plan gave me the kids most school nights, Rachel weekends, and a midweek dinner. Tyler refused to sign anything but promised to stay away from our house. That promise lasted 3 weeks until I saw his truck at the curb at 11 on a Sunday when the kids were with their mom. I took a photo, time-stamped, saved it to the folder of truth. I didn't send it to anyone. Inventory isn't action. Rachel left town in July, said she needed to stay with her sister in Flagstaff for a while to get her head right, to find work that didn't make her heart bend. She hugged the kids on the driveway and whispered something into each of their ears that made them both smile and cry at once. She hugged me and said thank you for not burning me to the ground. I told her there's enough heat here in summer. She didn't laugh. She got in her car and drove away slow, like goodbyes work if you do them in first gear. I kept the kids, I kept the house, I kept my job. It wasn't heroic, it was the list a dad does when he doesn't get to fall apart on the clock. The chili pot went back on the shelf. The couch felt like a neutral zone again. The plant stopped caring about my heart around the time the morning shift whistle blew. I still have the folder. It has the photo from the party with their geometry, the text screenshot that misses the warmth of a human voice, the bank memo line that called betrayal assistance, and the picture of Tyler's truck at my curb at the wrong hour. In another life, I would have printed them and handed them around like exhibits at closing argument. In this one, I did something uglier and wiser. I printed them, handed them to my lawyer, and asked him to staple them to a file that nobody but a judge would ever see. What's left is small and big at once. Pancakes on odd Saturdays and soccer practice on even Thursdays. A plant that hums. A house that throws late afternoon light like it wants me to stay. A daughter who now knows how to tell the truth without telling the whole world. A son who keeps asking me how to tighten bolts on the BMX we found at a yard sale. A best friend slot that sits empty like a chair I can't quite throw away. People still ask with their eyebrows whether the worst fumble at that party happened on TV or in my kitchen. I tell them a fumble is when a player loses something he meant to keep and tries to get it back. What happened wasn't a fumble. It was a lateral to the wrong team, on purpose. That hurts different. If you were me, would you have dragged the evidence into the center and made everyone look, or kept the burn private for the kids' sake and eaten the pride tax? And tell me, what's more corrosive over time in a neighborhood like ours, the memory of the public moment when a kid told the truth, or the quiet knowledge that your oldest friend looked at your life and reached out anyway? If stories like this matter to you, where the screenshots count and the ending chooses stability over spectacle, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more.